The laughter stopped mid-breath. In that moment, The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon, transformed from late-night comedy into something sacred. Ariana Grande sat frozen in the guest chair, her signature ponytail catching the studio lights as tears began to form in her eyes. Jimmy had just asked what seemed like an innocent question, but her response would shatter every expectation and create a moment that would define both their careers. It was a Tuesday night in October, and the energy in Studio 6B was electric. Ariana had just finished promoting her latest album with a powerhouse performance that left the audience breathless. She sat across from Jimmy in her usual spots, wearing an oversized cream sweater and thigh-high boots, her iconic ponytail styled to perfection. Everything felt routine, comfortable, exactly what you'd expect from two entertainers at the top of their game. Jimmy leaned back in his chair with that familiar grin. "You know, Ariana, I have to ask about the ponytail. It's become such a signature part of who you are. Do you ever think about changing it up?" It was supposed to be light banter, the kind of easy conversation that fills time between commercial breaks. But something in Ariana's expression shifted. The smile didn't fade immediately, but Jimmy noticed her hand instinctively reach up to touch her hair. There was a pause that lasted just a beat too long. "Actually," Ariana began, her voice softer than usual, "I got a letter yesterday that made me think about that exact question." Jimmy's comedian instincts told him to make a joke, to keep the energy light, but something in her tone made him lean forward instead. "What kind of letter?" Ariana reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of notebook paper, the kind with torn edges that suggested it had been carefully removed from a spiral-bound book. "This is from a girl named Sophie. She's 13 years old, and she's been fighting leukemia for 2 years." The studio audience, which had been buzzing with post-performance energy, began to quiet. Even the Roots, who were usually preparing for the next segment, stopped what they were doing. "Sophie wrote to tell me that she's been growing her hair out for 8 months, trying to get it long enough to look like mine. She said my ponytail made her feel strong, made her feel like she could fight anything." Ariana's voice caught slightly, but yesterday, her doctors told her she needs to start a new treatment. A treatment that's going to make her lose all her hair again. Jimmy felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't going where he expected, and suddenly the routine interview felt like standing on sacred ground. "She asked me," Ariana continued, unfolding the letter with trembling hands, "if I would consider cutting my hair and sending it to her. Not to wear, just to have. She said it would remind her that being bald doesn't make you less beautiful, less strong, or less worthy of having dreams." The silence that followed wasn't the kind of pause that happens during awkward television moments. It was the silence that occurs when everyone in a room realizes they're witnessing something profound. Jimmy looked at Ariana, then at the letter in her hands, then back at her face. "What did you tell her?" "I haven't answered yet," Ariana whispered. "I've been carrying this letter around for 24 hours, trying to figure out what to do." Behind the scenes, Jimmy made a decision that would define this moment forever. He could have moved to commercial, could have suggested they discuss this privately after the show. Instead, he did something that his producers would later call either brilliant or completely insane. "Ariana," he said, his voice stripped of all performance, "what if we answered her right now?" The camera operators, who had been shooting this like a standard interview, suddenly understood they were capturing something unprecedented. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was human connection happening in real time. "You mean?" Ariana looked around the studio, at the cameras, at the audience members who were hanging on every word. "I mean, if you want to cut your hair for Sophie, we'll do it right here, right now, on live television." The audience gasped audibly. Several people brought their hands to their mouths. In the control room, producers were frantically trying to figure out if this was planned, if they should cut to commercial, if they should let this continue. Ariana stared at Jimmy for a long moment. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." Look, that ponytail has been part of your image for years. It's on magazine covers, in music videos. It's practically trademarked. But if you want to show Sophie and everyone watching that there are things more important than image, more important than what people expect from us, then let's do it. Tears were streaming down Ariana's face now, but she was smiling. Not the practiced smile of a performer, but the radiant, genuine smile of someone who had just realized they weren't alone in wanting to do something meaningful. I need scissors, she said simply. Jimmy stood up immediately. Questlove, he called to the Roots band leader. Do you guys have any scissors back there? We got some wire cutters for guitar strings, Questlove replied, clearly as stunned as everyone else. That's not going to work, Jimmy laughed, the tension breaking slightly. He looked toward his production team. Can somebody get us some proper scissors? Good ones. Within minutes, a production assistant had brought a pair of professional haircutting shears from the makeup department. The entire studio watched as Jimmy held them up, the metal catching the stage lights. Are you absolutely sure about this? He asked Ariana one more time. She nodded, reaching up to touch her ponytail one last time. I've had this hairstyle for so long that sometimes I forget who I am without it. Maybe it's time to find out. Jimmy walked around the desk to where Ariana was sitting. How do you want to do this? Here, she said, indicating a spot about 6 inches from her scalp. Cut it here, so there's still enough length to look intentional. The studio was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning humming. Jimmy positioned the scissors carefully, making sure he was cutting exactly where she indicated. This is for Sophie, Ariana said, looking directly into the camera. And for every person watching who thinks they need to look a certain way to be worthy of love, of dreams, of fighting for what matters. Jimmy made the cut. The ponytail came away in his hands, and suddenly Ariana looked completely different. Her hair fell in soft waves just past her shoulders, framing her face in a way that seemed both vulnerable and powerful. The audience erupted. Not in the polite applause of television, but in the kind of celebration that happens when people witness something brave and beautiful. They were on their feet, cheering not for entertainment but for authenticity. Ariana ran her hands through her shorter hair, laughing and crying at the same time. Oh my God, I can't believe we just did that. Jimmy held up the ponytail, which was surprisingly heavy and remarkably long. This is going straight to Sophie, along with a note explaining exactly what happened here tonight. But the story doesn't end there, because what happened next revealed even more about who these two people really are. When the cameras stop rolling, and the crowd goes home. After the show wrapped, Jimmy and Ariana spent 3 hours in his dressing room, writing a letter to Sophie together. Not a quick note from a celebrity to a fan, but a real letter. They told her about the moment of decision, about what it felt like to choose courage over comfort, about how sometimes the most beautiful things come from letting go of what we think defines us. They included photos from the taping, but more importantly, they included promises. Jimmy promised to visit Sophie in the hospital if she wanted company. Ariana promised to FaceTime with her during treatments, to send voice notes when Sophie felt scared, to be not just a distant celebrity, but a real presence in her fight. The ponytail was shipped overnight to Sophie's hospital in Phoenix, along with the letter and something unexpected. Jimmy's Tonight Show coffee mug, the one he drank from every single taping, as a reminder that she had friends thinking about her every day. The episode aired exactly as it happened, with no editing to soften the emotional impact. The response was unlike anything in late-night television history. The hashtag, the ponytail promise, trended worldwide within hours, but more importantly, thousands of people began sharing their own stories of choosing authenticity over expectation, of finding courage in unexpected moments, of discovering that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply be real. Sophie received the ponytail 3 days later. Her mother posted a video of the moment, showing Sophie holding Ariana's hair with reverence, understanding that it represented something much bigger than celebrity kindness. It represented the moment when two people chose to use their platform for something more meaningful than entertainment. 6 months later, Sophie was declared cancer-free. Her hair had grown back in soft curls that she wore proudly without trying to make them look like anyone else's. Ariana kept her shorter hairstyle, saying in interviews that cutting off that ponytail had been one of the most liberating experiences of her life. But perhaps the most profound change was in how both Jimmy and Ariana approached their careers. After that night, they had discovered something that would reshape everything they did going forward. The understanding that their real power came not from making people laugh or sing along, but from making people feel less alone. The Tonight Show installed a tradition that continues today. In Jimmy's dressing room, there's a frame containing a single photo. Ariana, with her newly cut hair, smiling with tears in her eyes, holding Jimmy's hand as the audience stood and cheered. Underneath the photo is a simple inscription: "Sometimes the most beautiful moments happen when you stop performing and start being human." And Jimmy Fallon learned something that night that changed him forever. He learned that the greatest privilege of his platform wasn't the ability to make people laugh, though that remained important. It was the ability to create moments where people could be their most authentic selves, where vulnerability could be celebrated, where someone watching at home might realize that they too could choose courage over comfort. The ponytail promise became more than a viral moment. It became a reminder that in a world obsessed with image and performance, the most powerful choice we can make is to be real. Sometimes that means cutting off what others expect from us. Sometimes it means letting go of who we think we're supposed to be. And sometimes it means discovering that our true strength comes not from holding on to what defines us, but from having the courage to redefine ourselves entirely. Because that's what love looks like. That's what courage sounds like. And that's what happens when two people choose connection over content, authenticity over entertainment, and a 13-year-old girl's hope over everything else that seemed important just moments before. 3 years later, Sophie graduated from high school as valedictorian. Her speech, delivered to a packed auditorium, began with the words that had become her motto: "Sometimes the most beautiful thing you can do is let go of what people expect you to be." In the front row, her parents held back tears as their daughter, now cancer-free and radiant, spoke about resilience, authenticity, and the night a ponytail changed everything. Ariana was there too, sitting quietly in the back, wearing her hair in a simple bob that had become her new signature. She'd flown in from tour rehearsals, specifically for this moment. When Sophie mentioned her by name during the speech, thanking her for showing that strength comes in many forms, Ariana wiped away tears with the back of her hand. After the ceremony, the three of them, Sophie, Ariana, and Jimmy, who had also made the trip, sat together in Sophie's backyard. The conversation wasn't about fame or television or music. It was about growth, about the ways people change when they choose courage, about how a single moment can ripple outward and touch lives in ways never imagined. "Do you ever regret it?" Sophie asked Ariana, gesturing toward her hair. "Cutting it off, I mean." Ariana smiled, running her fingers through her shorter locks. "Not for a second. That ponytail represented who I thought I had to be. This," she gestured to herself, "represents who I choose to be." Jimmy nodded, understanding something he'd been processing for years. "That night taught me that the most important conversations aren't scripted. They're the ones that happen when you stop trying to be what people expect and start being who you actually are." The Tonight Show continues to this day, but it's different now. There's a framed photo in Jimmy's office of that moment, Ariana with her newly cut hair, holding his hand as confetti fell around them. But more importantly, there's a tradition that started that night. Before every taping, Jimmy asks himself one question: what would matter more than the show? Because he learned that the greatest television happens when you remember that the people watching aren't just an audience. They're human beings who need to know they're not alone in their struggles, their hopes, their moments of choosing courage over comfort. The ponytail, carefully preserved and framed, hangs in Sophie's room alongside her high school diploma and acceptance letters to 3 different colleges. But its real legacy lives in the thousands of messages sent to both Jimmy and Ariana, from people who watched that episode and decided to make their own brave choices. Messages from kids who stood up to bullies, adults who left jobs that made them miserable, families who chose honesty over pretense. That's what happens when late-night television becomes something sacred. When entertainment transforms into ministry. When 2 celebrities discover that their real power comes not from being famous, but from being human. The ponytail promise wasn't just about hair. It was about the promise we all make when we choose to be real. The promise to show up, to be present, to let our authentic selves matter more than our manufactured images. And in a world that often feels divided, disconnected, and defined by performance, sometimes that's the most radical thing you can do. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't a song or a joke or a perfectly crafted piece of content. Sometimes it's just the decision to cut off what people expect from you and discover who you are underneath it all.